All right, all right. Welcome to the My Sugar-Free Journey podcast. I am here today with Dr. Jaquish. So Dr. Jaquish is someone that I've tried to get on this podcast for a while. And Dr. Jaquish, your team of people that get things to you, it's hard to find your contact email and all that stuff online. But I am so glad that you're here because I am so interested in what you've done. And just all the different things that you've got going on. So before we get into the two things that I'm interested in, which is OsteoStrong and this X3 bar that I've heard so much about, let's get into your background. Tell us a little bit about how you got to this point and, what your background is and why we should definitely listen to what you have to say.
Okay. 13 years ago, my mother was diagnosed with osteoporosis.
Okay.
And she was devastated. I was a student at the time. And I just, I saw her suffering, and she was worried she would have a fragility fracture, which can be life-ending. 50% chance of death within 1 year of a hip fracture after the age of 50.
Right.
Very important statistic. So she realized that and was upset by it. And then she also looked into some of the pharmaceutical options and didn't like the side effects associated with those. So I said, let me focus on this. And so what I did was I did a literature review of, just trying to find who has the highest level of bone density and then why, right? So we want to find out who lives the longest. They've done a couple studies. The people in areas that live the longest, turns out it's because they're the happiest. And they isolated that because they kind of tried to figure out why people are living long. So okay. For me, it was I needed to find a population of people that had superhuman bone density. Figure out how they did it. I'll build a medical device, or I'll come up with something. I didn't know it would be a medical device. So when I started doing the literature review, it was very obvious. Gymnasts, because of the way they hit the ground,
okay,
they absorb tremendous forces through their body. And so therefore, I thought, okay, high impact is building bone density. And it turns out there's more than 100 years of research. The laws of mechanotransduction were written by Dr. Julius Wolff in 1896. So and what he would do is he'd look at people who went through impact, and then he'd do cadaver extractions after people would die. He'd saw into their bone, look at their bone, and then sedentary people, he'd saw into their bone after they died at the same age, and he'd compare the two. He said that it's obvious, the more mechanical loading you put through the body, the more you're going to be able to influence bone density. Now, so I saw this and I said, okay, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a series of medical devices that will create impact emulation. So what we're going to do is get people in the impact position. So 120 degree angle of the upper to lower arm.
Okay.
And in the back of the hand in line with the clavicle. So everyone who trips and falls, that's how they protect themselves. Okay. Right. So isolate that position and then allow for self-created force. Now the positioning is all robotic, so very precise. And there's a computer system that monitors the self-imposed force as somebody's pushing away from them. So through that process, we were able to influence bone density to an incredible degree. Like the trial we did in London, through the University of East London, we were able to demonstrate 13% bone density change in 6 months. Now, when you take this postmenopausal population, if you stop their loss, because typically they lose 2% per year, if you just have them lose nothing in a year, that's considered a smashing success. So we're heavily influencing the development of their bone density. So, and just just to put things into perspective, that type of bone density growth is like taking somebody from osteopenia back to healthy bone, which is, osteopenia is like pre-osteoporosis, or taking somebody with osteoporosis and putting them in the osteopenia range. And they can keep doing this for, let's say, 18 months and get right back to a T-score of 0. So the bones of a 30-year-old.
Why do women tend to lose bone density faster than men?
They don't.
They don't. So it's
menopause. Yes. Childbirth is very, it takes a lot of calcium out of bone. Like,
okay.
Bone is like a battery for calcium. Calcium is the only mineral that the body self-regulates. So
okay.
we use it every time an axon and a dendrite fire. Like every time there's a nervous system reaction, every time you blink, every time you breathe, your body's using that calcium. So it's very important. But the body self-regulates it. So actually, if you take in less calcium, your body hangs on to more. You intake more calcium, your body gets rid of a lot of it.
Okay.
So the idea, so the only way to really change that homeostasis is to give the body a reason.
Okay.
To keep more and more and more of it. So through this mechanical loading, this impact emulation, we have 4 different positions we load the body with. And through those loading events, the individuals are able to absorb incredible forces. And that observation got me to X3, but I was taking this postmenopausal population, women who had never exercised, ever. And we got them to the point where day 1, they're loading 100 pounds through the lower extremities. And they get to the point where they're up to 700, 800, 900 pounds of force.
Wow.
These people never exercise in the postmenopausal women. So I'm looking at like, okay, what we're really seeing is, yes, these women were getting stronger, but in the effort of loading bone, in emulating this high impact, we're getting to some hard numbers that show what we can actually do, what human capability is in these specific positions. So now OsteoStrong is in 7 different countries and has 127 locations, and helping people improve their bone density everywhere. Hundreds of thousands of people are being helped. And it's just, you only do it once a week. Primary mineralization happens between 5 and 10 days. So secondary mineralization takes 140 days. So the metabolic rate of bone is very different than the metabolic rate of your cardiovascular system or your musculature. So every tissue has a different metabolic rate in the human body. So it's just really important that people get this loading and then they wait a week. They come in and they get to view their functional bone performance.
Okay.
Very important term, because that's a dynamic test of how powerful bone is. So the gold standard of measuring what bone density looks like is called a DEXA scan, dual X-ray absorbiometry. And when a DEXA scan looks, it's just 2 X-rays that go in either your stomach, but it's looking at your spine or your hip. And it's a picture they create. And based on what that picture looks like, they determine the density or porosity of the bone. Now, what's more important, a picture of something or a functional test?
Well, I think a functional test for sure.
Sure.
Yeah.
Like if you have a cardiac problem, they don't just take your blood pressure.
Right.
That's just a number. They put you on a treadmill, cardiologists put you on a treadmill, watch your heart rate go up and down and determine it that way. So I started looking at these numbers and how people would come in every week. They can actually watch their functional bone performance number change week by week. So they're capable of putting force through bone at a higher degree. Now, the regulatory system is, we have a computer system that tells them what they're doing in real time. So they're competing with what they did the previous week. Okay. But what's so interesting is the human body is wired for safety. So like we have a process called neural inhibition. So if I squeeze a fist, can I squeeze it hard enough to break my own finger?
I don't think so. I've never done it.
Right. 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 You can't. And in fact, this is kind of a kind of graphic representation, but it takes more force to bite through a carrot than bite through your own finger. But you can't bite through your own finger.
Right.
Right. Because of the neural inhibitory process. So when we load the body like this, it's very self-regulatory. People need to be relatively ambulatory, not fully. You know, they can have some joint issues, some biomechanics that they may need to address also, but they can still load the body. And they need to be relatively pain-free. If they're hypertensive, that needs to be medicated.
Okay.
And then muscular dystrophy is the only other contraindication, because this is a very, very aggressive protein synthesis process that the body goes through. And that actually accelerates that disease condition. Very sad disease. So other than that, pretty much everybody can go in and do it.
Do these machines focus on just like, you know, the arms, the legs, the hips, or is it, you know, which bones are they focusing on?
Every long bone in the body.
Every long bone.
Every bone that's really affected by osteoporosis. So like your skull doesn't change when you have osteoporosis. The density of the skull, probably a good thing. Yeah, I mean, your head's just as hard when you're young as when you're older. But like the humerus bone right here, that can, or the clavicle, that can lose density.
Yeah, clavicle especially. Like, so I my listeners know I've got a mother-in-law that lives with us. She's 91 years old, and she had a fall about 2 years ago. Now that I thought for sure this was going to cause long-term damage, but when she fell, she hit her head, and she hit her head on the corner of a door, and it just split the skin open. But they went in, they stitched it up. She was fine, and she was moving at she was running, you know, if you can imagine a 90-year-old woman running, but she was running down a hall, hit an 80-pound dog, and just went flying, you know, caught herself, hit the door, all that stuff. And she was, she did break her hand. That's right. But she was fine. And it took her maybe 8 weeks to recover. And she, you know, she's fine. No ill effects. And so, I mean, obviously when I think of a 91-year-old woman, I think of someone who's brittle. This woman is just not brittle. And until very, very recently, she was always very active. She could walk around. She could, she never stopped moving. And I've wondered what it is. And she eats like us now, where, you know, she eats a ketogenic diet, a lot of meat. And I've wondered if she's, what she's doing to keep her health, where it is. But we got her to stop taking her statin, because she was just bound and determined. Doctor told her to take a statin. She's eating all this red meat. She's going to take this statin. We finally got her to stop taking this, but she still exercises every morning. She still does her stretches. She still is active, and then after that, she sits and she reads for like 6 hours a day, but she's still moving and she's still active, and was able to recover from, a very, very bad fall in, I would call it record time. I had never seen I don't know that I could have recovered any faster if I'd have had the same fall. She's fine. Right. And it's interesting, So your OsteoStrong machine, is this, help my reader, my listeners kind of understand. Is this somewhere that you go, like you go to a gym or something that has it, or to a medical center, or is it something that's in home?
Clinic.
You go to a clinic.
Yeah. These things are $100,000. You don't.
Okay. Okay.
And they're bigger than a car.
Okay.
Yeah.
But then you came up with something that people can have at home, and this was something else that I was.
Tony Robbins has them at his houses, but he's Tony Robbins. So.
Oh yeah. Well, he's Tony Robbins.
Let me think if anybody else does. I feel like there's like another like celebrity type that has a setup at their home. But that's interesting. Yeah.
But now
no, I did another sort of home training in in the palace, well, one of the palaces in the United Arab Emirates in Abu Dhabi.
Okay. Now, is this something that anyone of any age, should do, or is this something that's only, you get a little bit older and you want to start taking care of your bone health?
So peak bone mass happens at 30 years of age.
Okay.
Which is basically what that means is based on normative data, which I don't like, because normative data is based on pretty much everybody who's doing everything wrong. Because that's the general population, right? Like, so when somebody says, well, the normative data says, and your blood work should look like this. It's like people are eating trash and not moving around.
Exactly.
Like, who cares what they look like, but what their blood work looks like. But right. Ultimately, what was the question? I got totally distracted.
Oh, the age. I was just, is this something that,
yeah. So you want to do it either to make peak bone mass higher, to just be fracture resistant. Like, let's say you're getting ready to play college football.
Okay.
You're a high school student. You know you're going to continue with contact sports. You want to put that load through your bone. You want to become fracture resistant. So putting that force on the body will heavily influence how powerful bone is. Also, there's some speed changes that happen. The more powerful the bone is, the less neural inhibition. When you toe strike and push off with your calf and move forward, the stronger the bone, the bigger the engine. It's sort of like the chassis and the engine. Like, you can't take a Formula One engine and put it in an economy car and blow the wheels right off it. But you look at the Formula One chassis, that's a powerful chassis. So it can handle that Formula One engine. Same thing. You make the chassis of the body more powerful, it can host a much more powerful engine.
Now, if you're loading your bones in other ways, like if you're doing a lot of weightlifting, is there still some benefit to your machines, or is there, are you getting the same thing if you're deadlifting or doing a bench press or something?
So in 2012 in Bristol, United Kingdom, researchers, Deere, and some of the other professors at the university published probably the most brilliant study to determine what the minimum dose response is to grow bone in the hip.
Okay.
That makes sense? So
yeah.
How much force is required to, like, when you're over 30, it's like, here's your catabolic activity and here's your anabolic activity.
Okay.
Right? So you're breaking down more than you're building. So what does it take to make this ratio change and have more anabolic activity, growth, and less catabolic activity, breakdown? Because everything's growing and breaking down. Like, you're kind of recycling cells in your body all the time.
Right.
So what Deere and researchers determined is that they used accelerometers and then regular blood markers to determine what is happening inside of the body, how much breakdown, how much building there is. And so there's the CTX blood test, the P1NP blood test, and the BAP blood test. The P1NP and BAP are both anabolic tests. And then the CTX is the catabolic test. What they determine is through high impact activity, which is what we're emulating at OsteoStrong, that you needed a minimum of 4.2 multiples of your own body weight to do anything.
Okay.
So, like, weightlifting's good, but you can pick up like a 1 pound dumbbell. I could do this all day long. Am I going to make my bicep any bigger?
No. Yeah.
Right. So we have to have irrelevant force. It has to be exhausting. We know this with muscular growth. But before this, there had been another study done by Ritviger in Uvalska, Finland, in about 6 years earlier, and they got right around 4 multiples of body weight. So we see some congruency of data. Now, right in there, it wasn't as crystal clear of a study as the one out of Bristol. So now that we have these data points that determine the minimum dose response, and then there's yet another study right after that with one of the other researchers, Tobias, replicated this and tried to do it with a more elderly population. and they weren't able to achieve the 4.2 multiples body weight, which is kind of obvious. Yeah. But he just wanted to make sure, like, can they tolerate those impacts? Well, we can't tolerate the impacts because of the neural inhibitory process. But if it's slow and controlled loading, because impact is an out of control event.
Right.
At osteostrong, we control it.
Okay.
That's the difference.
Okay.
That's how people can get these high levels of bone density. Now, when it comes to going to the gym, like, clearly I like exercise, right?
Yeah.
Right. Watching this on video. I don't know if you have a lot of audio listeners, but I like exercise. It's important to me. I like being strong. But the strength training that I do, the low, it's just it's completely different type of exercise. Like, it doesn't matter how heavy you lift, you're probably not influencing bone density very much unless you're one of the top strength athletes in the world.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. So the average person, and I run into women all the time who maybe even premenopausal, and they said, I had a bone density test. I have low bone density. I don't understand. I exercise every day.
Right.
I do weight training every day. And I'm like, well, 4.2 multiples body weight. I know you're not training with that.
Right.
So yeah, you're not really influencing bone. So that, and when I realized that, that's when I started filing for patents and realized that this was something that needed to get all over the world. And I could improve the lives, maybe even save the lives of like millions.
Yeah.
Older women. So yeah, like I think I have the coolest job in the world. I wouldn't trade.
Yeah, because just like you said at the beginning, it's, if you're an older woman and you break a hip, you're really rolling the dice. I mean, who knows what's going to happen next? So that's pretty cool. I'm glad that exists, and I'm because I found out about osteo. I don't even know how I found out about it. But it's not something that's common knowledge. It's something that I really think that's one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on here, is because there really needs to be more people need to know that's an option.
Yeah.
Especially more elderly people.
When we have 1,000 or 2,000 locations, it'll be ubiquitous. People will be like, oh yeah, I've heard of that.
Okay. Well, that's good.
Well, it's one of those things where when something's new, especially when it's never been done before.
Right.
A lot of press doesn't want to cover it because they don't want to, let's say it's incorrect.
Right.
Like alkaline water that was talked about years ago, and people were saying, oh yeah, it's going to end all kinds of diseases. Alkaline water doesn't do anything.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Except it makes the water alkaline. Right.
Yeah.
It wasn't to scam. I think a lot of people went into alkaline water with the best of intentions, but the problem is the more alkaline your nutrition is, the more acid your body makes.
Yeah.
So what you eat is not always what ends up in your biochemistry.
Right.
Right. Sometimes it's the opposite, because the body's trying to find a way around this completely inappropriate material you just put in your body. So yeah. That's
what, I always remind people, when you eat something, the first thing that happens to it is you drop it into a vat of hydrochloric acid. I mean, there's not a whole lot that you're going to do to influence that. In fact, there's not a whole lot that you want to do to influence that.
Hydrochloric acid is not there.
Yeah.
Or if you've neutralized that acid, the body just starts pumping acid.
Pumping. Yeah.
Yeah. This is like the logic of proton pump inhibitors.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, they seem to work, and they give you devastating side effects.
Yep.
Like I tell people, anybody who takes a proton pump inhibitor, change your nutrition.
Yeah.
Don't take that.
Yeah. In fact, this is really off the subject, but I am glad now that Zantac has pretty much been taken off, not totally taken off the market, but it's a little harder to get because now we're finding out that it gives you cancer. Well, people have been saying that you don't want to reduce your stomach acid for forever, and now we've got proof that the actual molecule of Zantac, whatever the name of that medicine is, directly causes cancer. There's still people that are going to take it, that swear by it, that are going to eat crap food, McDonald's and everything else, and then take their Zantac and just be done with it. It's frustrating. I mean, it is frustrating for me, especially, just to see people make bad choices, because I saw what my bad choices did to me. I don't want anybody else to go through any of that. That's not good.
For sure.
All right. So moving on just a little bit, now you have a home system to increase strength. And I've seen ads for this all over the internet. The X3 bar. You got it right there. So there it is, the X3 bar. If you're watching this on X3, if you're watching this on video, he's showing the core piece of the X3, the bar.
It's a pretty simple, elegant device.
Pretty simple. What is it? Tell my listeners what it is and how you can use it.
What happened?
Or how you just,
what happened when doing the research in London is it became apparent to me that human beings are so much stronger in this impact ready range of motion. And when I compared what people normally lift to what I was seeing with these postmenopausal women, the difference between how we are in our weaker range, so like when you do a push-up, your nose is close to the ground, versus when your arm is almost fully extended, there's a 7-fold difference in capacity.
Okay.
So if there's a 7-fold difference in capacity, why would we pick the same weight in the joint damaging weaker range than we do in the stronger range? Because the muscle's really not having a lot of activity in that stronger range.
Okay.
And the stronger you become and the heavier you go, you're risking joint damage. And a lot of the joint damage is cumulative. So what we needed was a weight that in the compromised range of motion is lighter than normally that we'd handle. In the middle, something that we might normally handle, maybe even a little higher. But then where the musculature is becoming most efficient and where the bones are loaded on their axis, the weight really jumps up. So I wanted to create a loading situation where we loaded every part of the body in accordance to biomechanical capacities. So when I bench press, for example, and I've built up to this wasn't day one, but I hold 100 pounds at the bottom of this chest press movement. 300 pounds in the middle and 540 pounds at the top. Now, I'd never get under a bar with 540 pounds because if I dropped it, I'd be killed.
Right.
However, it's very safe because that 540 pounds is only 540 pounds in that impact ready position.
Okay.
So I get the benefit of hitting that 540 pounds and firing all the musculature to get it there. And I can even do that for 20, 30 repetitions. And then I can't get there anymore. It depends on the speed of the repetitions. That's heavily weighs on how quickly you exhaust. Right. You want to go slow though, because you want the stabilizers to fire. Then you start to fatigue the middle of the range. So you go from bottom to kind of halfway and do half reps. If you can't do those anymore, then the last few repetitions, we call this diminishing range. The last few repetitions are maybe just a couple centimeters. And so that way, it's complete exhaustion of the muscle. The evacuation of ATP, glycogen, and creatine phosphate is far beyond anything you could ever do with a weight. The myofibril stimulus is far beyond anything you could ever get with a weight. You can't even barely do that at all with general weight training because you're not firing enough musculature to really give a massive protein synthesis signal so that more myofibrils are formed inside the muscle cell. And then because we keep constant tension, the design of the product forces you to keep constant tension. Otherwise the band moves around on your back in the chest press, or you kind of lose your grip. So you keep constant tension. That creates an effect called hypoxia, which means the blood that's in the muscle stays in the muscle. It's not really taking hardly any blood in. It's not really letting hardly any blood out, which allows for a greater level of exhaustion of ATP, glycogen, and creatine phosphate. That means it's a greater signal to store more of those fuels after the exercise. So you're enlarging the cell because you're packing more fuel in there. Because body's like, whoa, we got really low on our 3 fuel systems. We gotta store a little bit more here because this might happen again. So I'm resetting where homeostasis is. So and then of course, testosterone upregulation. This is true of men and women. Testosterone is very important in women too. The determining factor of muscle growth is not actually testosterone, it's testosterone receptor site activity.
Okay.
The receptor site activity calls for your body to create more testosterone. So what's the greatest influence on receptor site activity? It's mechanical force. So we're going heavier than we ever would in the gym, but only in strategic positions where we can totally handle it. And we're going with high repetitions. So we're living in this zone of incredible loading of the body, and it's safe. So we're getting more growth because of those 4 reasons. And it's phenomenal. You do 1 set per exercise. It takes about 10 minutes. So like one day is chest press, triceps, and overhead press, and then squats. And then the next day is deadlift, calf raises, bent over row, and bicep curls. So there's 8 main exercises. There's a couple of supplementary ones, like the bodybuilder type who really wants the thick pectorals. You can do like a crossover kind of thing. But it's so simple. It takes 10 minutes and you're going to grow more than you would in the whole gym. So I tell people, people say, do you still lift, right? And I said, no, weightlifting is a waste of time. I have something far better. It wouldn't be a waste of time if this didn't exist. And so, the heavy latex banding hooks to this. And then there's a second ground that the bands move and flex underneath, because ultimately there's people who've been training with rubber bands, like physical therapy. Right. The problem with that type of banding is it's very weak, very low levels of force. So, even a contracted position, like I mentioned, you're 7 times stronger in stronger range, but if you got a 20-pound band, it's not going to do anything. Right. There's no getting away from heavy. Yeah. Similar to the bone, you really have to put tremendous forces through the body to create a change. So what I did in both regards, bone and muscle, I made that safe. And then we're able to get to those places because if we just had bands, let's say somebody were doing, throw a band around their back and they did a push-up with it. If it were heavy enough, San Francisco.
You're not on fire, are you?
Funny thing though, usually when they roll, there's something terrible happened. Yeah. They're not getting a cat out of a tree. they're somebody probably OD'd or something. That's terrible. So it's San Francisco, the greatest homeless population. Should I say greatest? Nothing great about it.
I don't know.
The
biggest.
The hell was I?
Oh, I'm sorry. You were talking about these bands they're flexing, right, and they're moving.
Yes.
Okay.
If you use a heavier band just by itself, this happens. You twist your joints. If you step on a band and you try and do like a deadlift, like a back exercise, your ankles will be twisting inward. So that causes neural inhibition. So either your muscles will just shut down and you won't be able to do it, or you'll actually create an injury. You could even break an ankle or a wrist. Yeah. So the answer was to come up with a bar that could manage hundreds of pounds of force with rotating hooks to keep level. Okay. So there's no torque on the wrist. And then what we have is the ground plate. So the bands move and flex underneath the plate so that your ankles are fine. It's just a flat piece of ground. It's a second ground you stand on that the banding moves underneath.
Yeah, because I always have problems with 2 things. Number one, my right knee, but I think that's just because I'm old. But my ankles, when I do anything heavy for a long period of time, my ankles really, really, really start to ache. And if I do if I try to do deadlifts twice a week for 6 months or something, my ankles will start to ache. And when you look at my shoes, if my shoes ever get, I don't have them in here, but if my shoes ever get about 4 months old, they're at an incline. I look like I'm, bow-legged or something. And they're, that's just for me walking around. They wear out, unevenly, I guess I should say. So my shoes are never flat. My shoes always roll to the inside, and it's just something that's weird. So I have a lot of problems with doing like weight, because I've got a deadlift rack in my backyard. And when I or squat rack rather, when I exercise, I'll do that for like 3 or 4 months, and then I'll be so sore I don't want to do it, and then I take some time off to rehabilitate and get healthy, and then I forget about it. I'm on to something else, and I lose any gains that I had, and then I have to go, okay, I should get back to this for a little while. I found some success with kettlebells. I love kettlebells, and I've got a 30-pound kettlebell that I can do a lot of different things with, but there's something about my lower body that just doesn't work right. So that's one of the things I was interested in your bar, because everything is adjusting as you go. I'm wondering if that wouldn't solve some of my problems.
The problem is when you're in those weaker ranges of motion.
Yeah.
Even people with biomechanics issues, they can still absorb impact. Maybe not as well. They can still do it. Like it's the highest performance of the joint is when it's loaded on its axis.
Right.
That's just full stop.
Okay.
It is. Yeah.
So what you said, I'm sorry, go ahead.
You're going to enjoy it. Okay.
You said you've got one set of exercises for day one, another set of exercises for day two. And then you recommend rest days? You just do that once a week? What's happening there?
You start off doing it 4 days a week. If you like doing it 4 days a week and you don't want to increase the intensity. So like, somebody who maybe a little nutritionally challenged, maybe not getting the right nutrients. Now for me, I am very aggressive with it. Like I want to get absolutely as much out of it as possible.
Sure.
So,
sure.
Right. So, I am I'm 6 days a week. I take one day off. Right.
Okay.
10 minutes a day also.
Right. So you're not doing it a bunch of times.
Yeah. Like people see me and they just imagine I spend like 2 hours in the gym every day. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, no, I work out at home for 10 minutes.
The first bodybuilder I ever had on this podcast, it was one of the questions I asked him. I was like, how, it must be, 5 hours a day. It's like, no, about 20 minutes a day. And, I think it was like four days a week, maybe 5. And I really, I had to sit down and go, wait, that did not track with what my idea of a bodybuilder would do.
Most bodybuilders train longer because stimulus with each set when you're lifting a regular weight is just not as efficient as a set here with X3. So, yeah. I mean, I've seen guys strategically be a little more efficient about their lifting. There are smarter ways to go about regular weightlifting. But, yeah, I mean, ultimately, you don't need to commit a ton of time. You need absolute fatigue of the muscle. And I just came up with a strategy to do that better than anything else has ever done.
What about if you have other goals besides just muscle growth? Do you do any like stretching or yoga or anything like that as part of your?
I recommend yoga. Like if you have a range of motion problem, yoga.
Yeah. Okay. All right.
There's other stretching programs. Like a lot of guys are like, well, I'm not going to yoga class. It's okay. There's, you can find stuff.
Yeah, I do DDP yoga. I enjoy it. I mean, I'll do it. And he's just got like a 10-minute warm-up video. It lives on my phone, and I go, watch that before I do anything, and it really helps because when I spent the first 40 years of my life doing nothing, but getting fatter, and I feel like a lot of times a lot of stretching, a lot of doing new things with my body because it's just. I was so sedentary for so many decades that I really need a little bit more,
Right.
I always feel brittle. Like I always feel like I'm right on the edge of an injury if I push myself or do anything. And so I've learned to slow down, stretch, warm up, all the things that they tell you to do that I think a lot of people just ignore.
Don't stretch before you lift.
Don't stretch before you lift?
No.
Oh, okay.
Shuts muscles off.
Really? That's interesting. Let's talk about that. Why does that happen?
Which after warm up, like if
Okay.
you do regular weights with X3, you don't really need to do a warm up because the first couple of repetitions, the way the load comes on the body, it is your warm up. But
Okay.
yeah, but generally warming up, just perform the movement a little bit lighter, and then you're going to move it. But when you start to stretch, it actually shuts muscles off. So like right now, you'll see a warm up. You won't see stretching, and then
Okay.
afterward.
That's okay. See, that's fine. That's definitely something I didn't know. And that's what I was telling you, I think before the microphones went on, the nutrition part of this, I love. And I've spent so many years, digging into this because I'm just fascinated by it. The exercise part of it, it's never been a priority for me. I do a little bit of exercise, but even when I exercise, I'm just trying to grow a little bit of muscle so that I burn energy a little bit more efficiently. And it's still, it's not so much strength as it is trying to continue to lose weight. Because I've still got about another 40, 50 pounds that I want to lose. And that's what I'm trying to do.
So your listeners have been following your journey.
Oh yeah. When I started this podcast, I was 350 pounds. So I had already lost 50 pounds. And so over the course of this podcast, this is episode 150 plus. So I think I released 150 the other day. So this will be like 154 or 5 when it comes out. Guys, if you're listening, don't hold me to that. I have absolutely no idea what, what episode number this is, but yeah, they've watched me lose 150 pounds over the course of this podcast, the ones that have been with me from the beginning.
That's awesome.
So it's just, in fact, I remember I forget it. His name just absolutely left me, but he's a guy that does street work in New York. Like all this, almost like the parkour stuff. And I cannot think of his name, but he was the first guy. Say it again.
Hannibal?
No, it wasn't Hannibal. But he was the first guy I interviewed at less than 200 pounds. And I was so happy. It was like I got it that morning, weighed myself. I was less than 200 pounds. And then like 20 minutes later, I was talking to him. So I just went talking about that. That was probably 75 episodes ago. Or actually less than that. It's probably about 50 episodes ago. But anyway, I digress pretty easily. So I try to stay on target. Sometimes I do it, sometimes I don't. But the X3 bar interested me for that reason, because of how it adjusts. I wondered if it was something that I could do that would do less. What would you call it? That would put less stress on my joints at odd angles, which I think was what was happening. Like I know, like when I was doing squats, I think when I was going down that my ankles were turning a little bit. And I think that was what was causing the issue. So that was one of the things that seemed interesting about your thing. Real quick, not really, you can just take as much time as you want with this. I'm also interested in what you eat, because I know that you've been on keto. I've been keto for a long time. And I know recently you've gone carnivore. This is something that I do from time to time. I'll go a month or two of carnivore and then come back and do some vegetables, whole vegetables, and then, go back to carnivore. I don't really know why I go back and forth. It's just something that, some days I wake up and I feel like I want a salad. And, but you've been carnivore for like a long time now. What can you tell us about that? What made you decide to do that?
November 1st, 2017.
Wow. That's a long time to eat just meat.
Right. Yeah. Now, I'm also not. It's about getting your nutrition like from the most nutritious place, which meats. I did a lot of research. Ultimately, like I invented the ultimate fitness product, and so I thought, okay, like I was already ketogenic. I knew that was a smart way to go.
Right.
Dave Asprey was a friend of mine.
Okay.
He's a friend of mine, and so like I bounced ideas off of him and pretty much just recommended the Bulletproof diet, and which is ketogenic.
It's ketogenic diet, yeah.
Some great advice coming along with it. But I thought, okay, I need to find what is absolutely the best nutrition plan for growing the greatest amount of muscle and being as lean as possible, because I want people to get the best out of X3.
Right.
So also came across the many references to the two greatest drivers of long life, which there's a lot of things that, you know, are quote drivers of long life, but then there's conflicting research about it.
Right.
No conflicting research about these two things. The two things that drive the longest life are being strong,
okay,
being lean.
Okay.
So stronger, leaner people live longer.
Right. I know caloric restriction is almost always talked about, you know, with some kind of level of intermittent fasting, but probably because at least the stronger, leaner
But
people.
see, is it caloric restriction, or are those people just lean?
Right. Yeah.
Like
What cause and effect?
Sure, we're not looking at a variable that causes something else.
Yeah.
That like is, you know, somebody who eats whatever 600 calories a day and barely has the energy to get off the couch versus me, where I'm, you know, going with X3, going hundreds of pounds. My deadlift is over 615 at peak force. There's an app for X3 that tracks how much force.
Oh, okay. I didn't know that.
Right. So I'm putting just huge forces through the body, and I'm a lean 220 pounds. I might be just as lean as the guy who's too weak to get off the couch.
Right.
But statistically, he's supposed to live a long time because he's emaciated.
Right.
I don't think that's the driver of long life. I think it's the lean part.
Perfect.
So ultimately, when I looked at all the data and I talked to some of the stronger people in the world, and when I started talking to these strength athletes and where they really get their results, it was me. And so I thought, okay, like I found Dr. Sean Baker.
Yeah. That's the guy, isn't he? I mean,
he's the guy.
Yeah.
He's the guy. And like his Joe Rogan podcast was just awesome.
Yeah.
And he's even done some better stuff since then. Not with as big of an audience as Joe. But he's done so many. He lays out the research very similar to the way I do it. And he and I are friends. I've been on his podcast too. Okay. But I discovered what he was saying, and I thought, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna try it, and let's see. And my results were better. I got leaner. My skin cleared up. Things got better that I didn't know had a problem. Allergies, barely a problem anymore. I used to have debilitating allergies every fall and every spring. Like I'm allergic to mold and all kinds of stuff. California's got pollen all over the place.
Yeah.
It barely and it was like a light switch. It wasn't like 2 years after I went carnivore. It's like, my allergies are better. It was immediate.
Yeah, and I've heard so many stories that, you know, that's saying, I know when I go carnivore, I lose 10 pounds in a month. I mean, it's pretty impressive how fast it goes away. And I think it's just like
totally efficient.
Yeah. All that.
I don't think I'm ever going to eat in a different way.
Okay. Well, that's good. That's good.
Yeah.
You know, I think I'm very interested in people who can maximize their health efficiently, because I don't have a ton of time. So I'm always looking for efficiencies. I'm always looking for ways to get more out of less time. So again, that's why I wanted to talk about X3, but that's why I wanted to meet you as well. So because I think that you're kind of interested in the same things I am.
Awesome.
All right. Well, Dr. Jaquish, why don't you tell my listeners what where they can follow you, where they can, find out more about the X3 bar or OsteoStrong or all that good stuff.
There's osteostrong.me.
.me. Okay.
Yeah, that's a website for OsteoStrong. You can find me on my more scientific place to find me is johnjaquish.com.
Okay.
And then Jaquish is the way you spell my last name. And then Dr. at DRJAQUISH on Instagram, or then Dr. John Jaquish on Facebook.
Perfect. Guys, we're going to put links to all of that in the show notes. You can find that at mysugarfreejourney.com/podcast. Dr. Jaquish, thank you so much for coming on the show.
Awesome.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
All right.
Those of you that are listening, hold on. We'll be right back with some more information.